हेलो दोस्तों। तो उम्मीद करता हूँ कि आपको मेरा पिछला वीडियो जो कि म्यूचुअल फंड्स का था, तो अभी ने गिवन द बैकग्राउंड और कॉन्टेक्स्ट बिहाइंड म्यूचुअल फंड्स इन दैट वीडियो. आई होप यू एंजॉयड इट. And as I had told you in the last video, I told you that we will do a detailed analysis around the performance of mutual funds in my subsequent video, and here we are. तो आज मैं आपको बताने वाला हूँ कुछ key ratios which are basically risk to reward ratios in different cells. Sharpe's ratio के बारे में मैंने आपको बताया था. Sharpe's ratio basically measures the reward per unit of total risk. Trainor's ratio measures the reward per unit of systematic risk. इसके अलावा और एक रेशियो है which kind of measures the reward per unit of unsystematic risk, and that is called as appraisal ratio. Okay, so what I will do is ये तीनों डायमेंशंस, रिवॉर्ड्स और रिस्क्स के नॉमेनक्लेचर्स कुछ अलग हो सकते हैं, बट एसेंशियली Sharpe's ratio will take into account total risk. Trainor's ratio will take into account systematic risk, and appraisal ratio will take into account unsystematic risk. So इसको ग्लोबल ज्ञान ना रखते हुए let's kind of put it on an Excel sheet and show it to you. Okay, and I'll do it quickly. So we'll not do it statistically. We'll try to do it with the use of Excel functions, although statistically the same results aate hain, but still we'll use Excel functions so that it's faster. So ये एक mutual fund है. Assume that this was the year 2023. ये 2023 का डेटा है for a mutual fund also and for Sensex also. Now, जब आपको म्यूचुअल फंड और सेंसेक्स का डेटा सामने दिख रहा है, alright, the first step whenever you see some data like this which gives you returns for a mutual fund and for an index like a Sensex, the first step you should do is find out the mean return. तो सबसे पहले हम mean को find out करेंगे, which is nothing but average. So we will take the average return of the mutual fund, and we will also take the average return of the Sensex. And दो decimal कर देंगे so that we are clear about the exactness of the returns. इसके बाद हम mean returns के बाद में we will move to the risk aspect. So risk के लिए we will find out standard deviation. तो अगर आप देखेंगे इनका standard deviation is equal to STDEV dot S करके हम निकाल सकते हैं for both mutual funds as well as the index. तो आप देखेंगे कि म्यूचुअल फंड का स्टैंडर्ड डिविएशन 9.73% था, whereas Sensex का 10.14%. Now here's the interesting part. That means on the face of it, mind you, on the face of it, म्यूचुअल फंड ने सेंसेक्स से ज्यादा रिटर्न दिया आपको इस साल में, और उसकी वॉलेटिलिटी भी कम थी. वाह, फैंटास्टिक, बहुत बढ़िया म्यूचुअल फंड है. सो ऑन द फेस ऑफ इट, इट टेल्स यू that the mutual fund has delivered greater returns compared to Sensex in that year, and also the standard deviation was lower. That means greater returns at kind of the lower risk as compared to the benchmark. Now what we will do, we will try to find out the Sharpe's ratio. So Sharpe's ratio के बारे में मैंने आपको last time बताया था. It is the return that is generated by a portfolio or a fund over the risk-free rate of return divided by the standard deviation, total risk. Assume कि एक ये यूएस का फंड है and यूएस का रेट जो है 3% हम देते हैं. So assume that the RP in this case is 8.5% for the mutual fund minus 3% risk-free rate divided by the standard deviation of the mutual fund, which comes to 0.56. Now here is the interesting part. अगर आप इनका Sharpe's ratio देखें, not very impressive, isn't it? It's not more than 1. That means for every 100 units of return, for every 100 units of risk that you take on, you are getting an incremental reward of just about 56.5 units. So I wouldn't say it's something very great. तो यही होता है सर, जब आप सामने किसी चीज को देखते हो तो आप गहराई में नहीं देखते हो. You just look at it and face value, and that's why you have to be very, very careful, because Murphy's law will always play. Murphy's law क्या बोलता है? Everything that should not go wrong will go wrong. Aha. So now what we will do, we'll try to see what the incremental rewards are per unit of the systematic risk, जिसके लिए हमें बीटा फाइंड आउट करना पड़ेगा. रिमेंबर बीटा, as I told you last time in my last video, beta is nothing but the slope, d by dx. It measures the change or a response of a security or a portfolio or a fund vis-a-vis the response to the index, right? So dy dx slope हम find out करेंगे, which will give us the beta. So let's find out the beta for the mutual funds. So slope known y's will be the returns that are generated by the mutual fund. Known x's will be your सेंसेक्स रिटर्न. तो आप देखेंगे कि आपका बीटा जो है, it comes to 0.8788, right? And normally I told you I take 5 decimals, so it's 0.87876. So Treynor ratio निकालने के लिए अब हम तैयार हैं. So Treynor ratio is RP, which is the return of the mutual fund minus RF 3% divided by beta in this case. So beta is given to you. So you will get a Treynor ratio of 0.06. इसको हम कई बार Treynor ratio को हम percentage terms पे भी देखते हैं, which is just about 6.26%. Now let's come to the appraisal ratio. So appraisal ratio अगर आप देखेंगे, appraisal ratio is nothing but Jensen's alpha divided by the root of unsystematic risk, जिसके लिए हमें पहले Jensen's alpha निकालना पड़ेगा. And Jensen's alpha is your actual return minus expected return, which means now first we have to find out the CAPM return. तो सबसे पहले हम find out करेंगे CAPM return, which is risk-free rate of 3% plus the beta for the mutual fund into market return, which is 7%, index return minus risk-free rate 3%. तो यहाँ पे आपको पता चलेगा कि आपका CAPM return is 6.52%, जबकि आपके म्यूचुअल फंड की रिटर्न 8.5% है. इसका मतलब your Jensen's alpha is now positive, which is the mutual fund actual return over and above the expected return, which is coming to about 1.98%. अब हमें फाइंड आउट करना है अनसिस्टमैटिक रिस्क. तो सबसे पहले हम टोटल रिस्क निकालेंगे म्यूचुअल फंड का. टोटल रिस्क हमको पता है, इट इज द स्क्वायर ऑफ द स्टैंडर्ड डिविएशन. So standard deviation of the mutual fund square, ये हो गया आपका total risk. Systematic risk, beta square into the variance of the market, which I told you last time in my last video. Beta square into the variance of the market. So ये बन गया आपका systematic risk. अगर आप इसको इससे reduce करेंगे तो you will get your unsystematic risk, which comes to this. So now let's take it to 5 decimals and see what numbers you get there. All right, great. So ये बन गया आपका total risk, systematic risk और unsystematic risk का input. And यहाँ पे you have your Jensen's alpha का input. Now keeping these both, ये भी एक input है, right? And ये भी एक input है. और appraisal ratio हमें दोनों inputs लगेंगे. We will need the unsystematic risk also, and we will need the Jensen's alpha also, और हमने दोनों compute कर लिया है. So we are now ready to find out the appraisal ratio, which is nothing but Jensen's alpha divided by unsystematic risk. के लिए हमें square root लेना पड़ेगा, because वो square terms पे, so we'll take the square root of the unsystematic risk. and we will get the appraisal ratio of 0.51. Now, if you look at these numbers carefully, right, what are you seeing? You are seeing that from Sharpe's ratio is 1 से ज्यादा नहीं, which means हर यूनिट ऑफ रिस्क जो आप ले रहे हो उससे ज्यादा आपको इंक्रीमेंटल रिटर्न्स नहीं जनरेट कर पा रहा है म्यूचुअल फंड. अप्रेजल रेशियो किस लिए, व्हाई इज इट कॉल्ड अप्रेजल रेशियो? बिकॉज ये फंड मैनेजर की रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी है कि अनसिस्टमैटिक रिस्क को डाइवर्सिफिकेशन से कम कर सके. इफ यू रिड्यूस योर अनसिस्टमैटिक रिस्क, योर अप्रेजल रेशियो goes on increasing. Denominator कम होगा तो obviously, right? Which means it's the fund manager's responsibility to reduce the unsystematic risk by diversification, and therefore that measures, or rather that is measured, his ability is measured by the appraisal ratio. Trainer's ratio सिर्फ systematic risk को प्राइस करता है, so बीटा के हिसाब से. तो अगर आप इन ratios को देखें, right, you are, what are you seeing? That on the face of it, although for this year the mutual fund actually generated higher returns at lower risk compared to the market, but the ratios are not that great too. So इसमें दो परिणाम निकलते हैं. नंबर वन, कोई भी चीज को फेस वैल्यू पे लेके आपको इन्वेस्ट नहीं करना है. Remember, that's why there is a big statement every time there's a mutual fund advertisement. Mutual fund investments are subject to market risk. Read the offer documents or prospectus documents carefully before investing. तो कोई भी चीज को हमें फेस वैल्यू पे नहीं लेना है, हमें एनालिटिक्स करनी है. एंड ये तो सिर्फ 1 साल का डेटा था, सर्टेनली नॉट इनफ. ये इसलिए किया गया ताकि मैं आपको एक एग्जाम्पल दे सकूं, एक स्नीक पीक दे सकूं कि ये रेशियोज होते क्या हैं. But what we have to do is we have to take the ratios for at least 5, 7, 10 years to see some kind of a trend. कई बार क्या होता है, कई नेक्स्ट ईयर हो सकता है वॉलेटिलिटी कम हो तो आपके ratios improve भी हो जाए. So you shouldn't go by any particular year. Try to always do some kind of a trend analysis to see what the mutual fund has been performing, and that's where the information ratio will become very important. Information ratio will tell you the consistency, how consistently the mutual fund has been generating and beating the benchmarks. Okay. So hopefully this video also added some kind of value to you all in terms of seeing risk to reward or reward to risk ratios with 3 different dimensions of risk: total risk, systematic risk, and unsystematic risk. Now comes the most interesting part. Can we validate some of these numbers by regression? We can. तो हम क्या करेंगे? What we will do now is we will go to the regression pack and let's try and see something more important, something that you will probably really enjoy in this video. तो मैं क्या करूँगा? First I will put the Y range and X range and the output range also. So let's take the Y range. Obviously अभी तक आपको पता चल गया होगा, Y will be the dependent variable mutual fund, X will be the independent variable Sensex. Confidence level 95 रखते हैं, and let's keep the ANOVA table here and press OK. तो आपका ANOVA अब generate हो गया. सबसे पहले ANOVA पे हम जाके देखेंगे कि slope क्या निकलता है. Ideally it should be a beta. Yes it is. आप देखेंगे. So 0.87876 is your beta, which is exactly what we had found out. इसके अलावा हमें ये देखना है कि what are your, how can we also find out a systematic and unsystematic risk separately. उसके लिए मैं एक छोटी सी एनालिसिस करूंगा, प्लीज ध्यान दें, बहुत ही जरूरी है. आई डोंट नो you would have learned this or you would have seen something like this ever before. सबसे पहले हम क्या करेंगे? We will find out the predicted values. Predicted values using the regression model. So predicted values, y is equal to mx plus c is equal to m. M is your slope into x. X is your Sensex plus C. C is your intercept. उसके बाद what we will do is we will freeze these predicted values. Rather, we'll freeze only the M and C in the predicted values. And we'll drag it down. तो ये आपके predicted values हो गई. Now what we will do, we will try to find out the explained and the unexplained variances. The explained variance will be nothing but your modeled values minus the mean return of the mutual fund. And इसको हम नीचे ड्रैग करेंगे, and then we will take the unexplained variances, which is your, I mean, these are not in square terms, just when unexplained, I would rather say it's explained deviations than unexplained deviations. So unexplained deviations will be your actual mutual fund returns minus your predicted values. So ये हो गया आपका unexplained. Now what we will do, we will find out the standard deviations for this. It's equal to STDEV dot S, and we'll see it for both the explained as well as the unexplained. And then we will find out the variances, that is in square terms. And let's see if these numbers ring some bell in our ear. Now, what do you see here? You will see that the variances around the explained. So if you take the standard deviation for the explained deviation distribution, you arrive at nothing but your systematic risk, right? Obviously, because it's beyond your control as to how much the volatility will be away from the expected or the mean. And if you take the, modeled and the mean, and the actual differing from the predicted is your unexplained, that is basically your unsystematic risk, and that's what you can control. So you will see यहाँ पे 0.00153. तो अगर आप ये देखें, this number exactly matches what we have here. And this number also exactly matches what we have here. See, so there are so many ways in which you can interpret data. तो कोई भी decision लेने से पहले try to do some kind of analytics. See what is the return, what is the risk, what is the incremental return over and above what you can, earn by way of simply investing in a government security, divided by the total risk. See what is your Sharpe's ratio. If you want to do it on the basis of just systematic risk, you can do Treynor's. For a mutual fund, very important if we can do it, if we can find out the incremental returns or rewards over the unsystematic risk. Ideally, that should be higher because your systematic risk should be eliminated by the mutual fund manager, by good levels of diversification. तो ये सारे ratios ही हैं, सिर्फ expense ratio नहीं देखना होता है हमें. We have to see a lot of these trends over a period of time and then take an informed decision. Now, I hope you enjoyed the video. Stay tuned for more. I know this was a lengthy one. You can keep watching these videos on my YouTube channel, Concept Canvas. And just to remind you, I'm also an AMFI registered mutual fund distributor. And obviously, apart from management consulting, I'm also into wealth management, tax planning, also into insurance advisory, etc. I can be reached out at premiawealth@outlook.com. And my phone numbers are 88502-27410 or 99205-28261. Have a good day ahead. Thank you very much. Keep watching, keep learning. Bye-bye.